Nobody in Washington that Sunday afternoon expected to still be talking about this match 2 days later, and definitely nobody expected the ending that actually happened. Because what unfolded at the Mubadala DC Open wasn't just a rain delay or a scheduling headache, it was one of the wildest comeback stories tennis has produced in years. And it happened to a 21-year-old who wasn't even supposed to be the center of attention when the tournament began. Her name is Alex Eala, a kid from Quezon City in the Philippines who showed up in Washington ranked outside the top 25 in the world. The kind of ranking that gets you into a draw but doesn't get you a highlight reel. And by the time the week was over, she had turned that draw into a demolition derby, taking out an Olympic gold medalist, a defending champion, a top 10 player, and a 4-time Grand Slam winner, one after another, like she was working through a checklist instead of playing the best players on the planet. And if you think that sounds exaggerated, stick around, because it gets even harder to believe from here. Let's rewind for a second and set the scene, because you need to understand exactly how absurd this run was before we get to the chaos of the final itself. Alex opened her week by beating Zheng Qinwen, an Olympic champion, which on its own would have been the story of most players' entire season. Then she turned around and knocked out Leylah Fernandez, the woman who had won this exact tournament the year before, the defending champion, gone. Next up was Elina Svitolina, a former top 10 fixture and one of the most respected competitors on tour, and Alex beat her too. And if that wasn't enough, she then walked onto the court against Naomi Osaka, a 4-time Grand Slam champion, someone who has literally won the biggest titles tennis has to offer. And Alex beat her as well, sending the 2-time Grand Slam winner home and booking her spot in her first-ever WTA 500 final. 4 matches, 4 massive scalps, and somehow this was still just the appetizer. Waiting for her in the final was Jessica Pegula, the world number 3, a player who had already built a resume most athletes would dream of. Someone who'd made deep runs at majors, who had reached number 3 in the world through consistency and smart, controlled tennis, and who happened to have history in Washington specifically, because this was the exact tournament where she had won her very first WTA title, all the way back in 2019. There was also a personal storyline simmering underneath all of this. Pegula and Alex had actually met before, at the Miami Open in 2025, where Pegula came out on top after a grueling 3-set battle. So this wasn't just a rookie versus a veteran storyline, there was unfinished business here, a rematch with real stakes attached, and everyone assumed that whatever happened, it was going to be a fight. Nobody, though, and I mean nobody, predicted just how many twists this final would take before a champion was finally crowned. The tournament was already dealing with weather trouble before a single ball had even been struck in the final. Storms rolled through the Washington area that Sunday, the kind of heavy, persistent rain that makes groundskeepers groan and broadcast schedules collapse. And the match that was originally supposed to begin around noon ended up getting pushed back nearly 3 hours. By the time the players finally walked out onto stadium court, the sky had cleared just enough to make it possible. But the air was thick, humid, and heavy, the kind of conditions that make every rally feel like it's being played through soup. And for a little while, it looked like Pegula's experience was going to be the deciding factor. She came out composed, settled, playing exactly the kind of steady, high-percentage tennis that had carried her to the top of the rankings in the first place. She found her rhythm from the baseline, controlled the tempo, and closed out the first set 6-4. The kind of scoreline that suggested the more experienced player was firmly in control, and the rookie run might be about to hit its ceiling. But here's the thing about Alex that had already been on display all week. She does not fold just because she's down a set. Instead of wilting under the pressure of facing the world number 3 in a final, she came out swinging in the second set, holding her opening service games with real confidence and grabbing a 2-games-to-1 lead. The match had shifted. The momentum, for the first time, belonged to the Filipina underdog. And the crowd, which by this point was absolutely packed with Filipino fans who had traveled to support her, could sense it. And then, almost cruelly, the rain came back. Just 55 minutes of tennis had been played, barely enough time to get a real read on where the match was headed. And the players were forced off the court again as the storms rolled back in. What followed was hours of waiting, delay after delay, tournament officials trying everything they could to dry the courts, fans sitting under umbrellas hoping for a miracle. And eventually the inevitable announcement came down: the match could not be finished that day. Play would resume the next afternoon, Monday, at noon local time, with Pegula still holding that one-set lead and Alex trying to build on her small second-set advantage. Now, if you've ever watched a sporting event get suspended overnight, you know how strange that in-between period can feel. The match isn't over, but it isn't really happening either. Players go back to their hotel rooms with the scoreline frozen in place, forced to sit with whatever emotional state they were in when the rain hit, good or bad, and just wait. For Pegula, that meant sitting on a lead, trying to keep her focus locked in overnight without the rhythm of live competition to carry her forward. For Alex, it meant carrying the momentum she'd just built, but also carrying the nerves of knowing she was one set away from potentially losing her first-ever WTA final, and having an entire extra day to think about it before she got the chance to finish the job. When Monday finally arrived, the courts were dry, the skies had cleared, and the tournament picked back up right where it left off. Pegula up a set, Alex trailing but pushing in the second. And this is where the story stops being just another rain delay tale and turns into something genuinely special. Because Alex did not come out of that overnight pause, tentative or rusty. She came out looking like a completely different player. Sharper, more aggressive, more locked in than she had been even in the moments before the rain first interrupted things. She took that second set momentum and turned it into a full second set victory, leveling the match at one set apiece and forcing this final into a decisive third set against one of the best players in the world. Think about what that actually means for a moment. This is a 21-year-old playing in her first ever WTA 500 final, against a former finalist and former champion of this exact event, ranked number 3 in the entire world. And instead of crumbling under the weight of the occasion after a full day's delay, she flipped the entire match on its head. And then came the third set. And this is the part of the story that turned Alex from a feel-good underdog story into a genuine tennis phenomenon. Because she didn't just win the deciding set, she obliterated it. 6-0, a bagel, against the world number 3 in a title match, with a crowd full of her countrymen screaming her name so loudly it was reportedly drowning out the cheers for the American player on her home soil. Pegula, who had been so composed and controlled in that first set, simply had no answers in the final stretch of this match. Whatever rhythm she had built on Sunday afternoon was gone, and Alex was playing with a level of freedom and aggression that swept the American completely off the court. When the final point landed, it wasn't just a win, it was a full-blown breakthrough, the kind of moment that changes the entire trajectory of a career. Eala had just won her very first WTA Tour singles title, and she had done it by coming back from a set down to beat the top seed of the entire tournament. 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. A scoreline that tells its own story of a match that completely flipped from one set to the next. And here's the piece of this that makes it even bigger than just one player's breakthrough. Because Alex wasn't just winning a trophy for herself, she was making history for an entire country. She became the first Filipina in the history of the sport to win a singles title on the WTA Tour. Think about that for a second. An entire nation with a deep love for sports, and until this moment, nobody had done what Alex had just done. It's the kind of achievement that turns a tennis match into a genuine cultural moment, and you could feel it in the stands. Because the crowd that packed the venue for the Monday resumption was overwhelmingly Filipino, flags waving, chants echoing across the court, an atmosphere that by all accounts made it feel less like a neutral tournament final in the United States and more like a home game for the 21-year-old chasing history. Pegula herself acknowledged just how loud and passionate that support was, admitting after the match that while it obviously wasn't fun being on the receiving end of that kind of crowd energy, she genuinely respected and appreciated the atmosphere Alex had built around her run. And that's a classy thing to say after losing a final you were leading. But it also says something about just how far Alex's story had traveled by that point. Even her opponent could recognize she was witnessing something bigger than a normal tour-level match. There's also something worth pointing out about the way Alex talked about the win afterward, because she wasn't shy about how surreal the whole thing felt. By her own admission, if you had told her at the start of the week that she'd be standing there holding a WTA 500 trophy, she wouldn't have believed you. And honestly, given the level of opponents she went through to get there, that reaction makes total sense. Winning a 500-level event is already a massive achievement for any player on tour. But doing it by running through an Olympic champion, a defending champion, a former top 10 player, and a 4-time major winner, and then closing it out with a comeback win over the world number 3 after a rain delay stretched the final across 2 separate days. That's not just a good week. That's the kind of week that gets replayed in highlight packages for years. And the ripple effects of this win go well beyond the trophy itself. A result like this doesn't just come with prize money and ranking points, although those matter plenty. It comes with a jump into the top 20 of the world rankings, a career high for Alex, and a signal to the rest of the tour that this isn't a fluke run. This is a player who belongs at the top level of the sport going forward. Before this tournament, Alex was a name tennis fans who follow the sport closely knew as a rising talent. Someone with obvious skill who hadn't quite broken through on the biggest stages yet. After this tournament, she's a Grand Slam-level threat. Someone every top-ranked player is going to circle on the draw sheet and think twice about facing. That's the difference a week like this makes. It doesn't just add a title to a resume. It changes how the entire sport perceives a player. And it's worth remembering just how unusual it is for a rain delay to actually add to a story instead of taking away from it. Normally, when a match gets suspended overnight, it just becomes a footnote, a scheduling inconvenience mentioned once and forgotten. But here, the delay ended up amplifying the drama instead of diminishing it. Because it gave the entire tennis world an extra day to sit with the tension of a match hanging in the balance. An extra day for Filipino fans to get even louder in their support. An extra day for the stakes to build before the actual conclusion arrived. And when that conclusion finally did arrive, it delivered in a way that almost felt scripted. A complete role reversal from set 1 to set 3. A rookie finding another gear exactly when she needed it most. And a title match that ended with a bagel set against one of the most accomplished players in the world. There's also a broader storyline sitting underneath all of this that's worth mentioning. Because this tournament wasn't happening in a vacuum, it was unfolding right before the US Open, one of the biggest events on the entire tennis calendar. Which means Alex didn't just win a title in Washington. She walked into the year's next major championship with an enormous amount of confidence and momentum behind her. A fresh WTA title, a career-high ranking, and a signature win over a top 3 player fresh in her memory. That's the kind of momentum that can carry a player deep into a major draw, and it instantly puts her name into conversations about potential surprise runs at the US Open that most people wouldn't have been having about her just 2 weeks earlier. So where does this leave us? A 21-year-old from Quezon City walked into a tournament as a solid but unheralded player outside the top 25, and walked out as a WTA title holder, a career-high top 20-ranked player, and the first Filipina to ever accomplish what she just accomplished on tour. She did it by beating 4 accomplished, decorated opponents in a row, then survived a chaotic, storm-interrupted final that stretched across 2 days, dropped the first set to the world number 3, and then delivered one of the most emphatic comeback performances you'll see in a title match, closing things out with a set that Pegula simply had no response to. It's the kind of story that reminds you why sports can be so compelling in the first place. Not because the outcome was predictable, but because it absolutely wasn't. Because a rain delay that could have deflated all the momentum instead became the pause before an explosion. And because a player nobody outside hardcore tennis circles was talking about a week earlier is now a name the entire sport is going to be watching very closely heading into the US Open and beyond. If this is the level Alex is playing at right now, the rest of the tour has every reason to be paying close attention. Because based on what just happened in Washington, this run might just be getting started.